For years, the millionaire CEO's twin children, Aiden and Aria, had become the silent nightmare of the city's most qualified nannies. At just 7 years old, their reputation had spread beyond the walls of the mansion and into agencies across the region. Every nanny who entered that grand house came out with stories that bordered on legend, stories of pranks that felt calculated, arguments that twisted logic, and silence that was more intimidating than screams. The twins weren't wild in the usual sense. They didn't throw tantrums, break furniture, or scream endlessly. Their rebellion was quiet, intelligent, and deliberate. They questioned every instruction, challenged every routine, and ignored every attempt at authority. They would speak only when they wanted to and often communicated with each other using subtle glances, as if they shared their own secret language. What made it worse was how brilliant they were. They noticed everything, tone, expression, hesitation, and used it to their advantage. The CEO, a man known for controlling million-dollar deals with ease, was utterly powerless in his own home. His work demanded long hours, and after his wife passed away 3 years earlier, the twins changed. They stopped smiling. They stopped listening. They began testing every adult who entered their world. To them, nannies were temporary faces, people who would eventually leave like everyone else. The mansion staff stayed out of their way. Cooks and housekeepers whispered their names like a warning. One nanny had resigned after just 2 days, claiming the twins locked her in the upstairs study and convinced the staff she'd gone home early. Another left in tears when Aiden hacked her phone and sent fake resignation messages to her family. A retired schoolteacher, considered unbreakable, quit after the twins spent an entire day pretending she didn't exist. Agency after agency refused to send new candidates. Even the ones offering elite childcare professionals backed out when they heard the name of the employer. It didn't matter that the salary was triple the industry standard, or that the position came with a private suite, a car, and generous bonuses. No one wanted to face the twins, not anymore. What unsettled most adults was the strange calm behind the children's resistance. It wasn't anger, it was distrust. Their defiance wasn't loud, it was sharp, precise, and deeply rooted in something no one tried to understand. Outsiders thought the twins were spoiled. Insiders knew there was something more, something broken, buried beneath their silence and pranks. By the time the story begins, the CEO had almost given up hope. The last nanny had lasted only 5 days. The agencies had stopped returning his calls. And the twins, clever, distant, and unshakable, waited for the next person to try, and fail. Before she ever arrived, the CEO's mansion had become a revolving door of nannies, each one arriving with confidence and leaving in shock. Over the span of 2 years, more than 21 nannies had attempted the job. None lasted more than a week, and many didn't survive past the 3rd day. Every exit came with a new story that spread through nanny agencies like wildfire. The CEO spared no expense. He hired candidates with the best credentials, graduates from elite childcare institutes, professionals with psychology backgrounds, even experienced caretakers who had worked with children of royalty and diplomats. But the twins dismantled each one with a quiet precision that left people stunned. One nanny, a former child therapist, quit after the twins staged a flawlessly executed, silent rebellion. For an entire day, they followed her every instruction, word for word, but in a way that twisted her words into discomfort. When she said, "Finish your lunch and sit quietly," they sat so still and stared at her without blinking that she begged the staff to intervene. She later confessed she felt like she was being tested by tiny, well-dressed detectives. Another candidate, a retired army nurse with a reputation for discipline, thought she had the upper hand, until Aria faked a fainting spell and Aiden calmly told her, "We already called an ambulance to make sure you don't mess it up." The ambulance really did arrive. The CEO had to pay fines and calm officials. She left that night, refusing to take her paycheck. An agency once sent twin specialists, 2 sisters who worked as a team with a strong background in child psychology. They lasted exactly 4 days. The millionaire came home one evening to find the specialists sitting outside the mansion gate, holding their suitcases, whispering to each other in disbelief. When asked what happened, one muttered, "They don't need nannies. They need negotiators." Some nannies tried being friendly. The twins ignored them. Others tried strict schedules. Aiden and Aria manipulated them into breaking their own rules. One woman tried to win them over with gifts and games. They took the gifts, hid them around the mansion, then blamed her for theft. No matter the approach, emotional warmth, discipline, bribery, distractions, psychological methods, every nanny met the same wall of rejection. Agency directors started flagging the CEO's case as unmanageable. A few even advised him to consider boarding schools or live-in therapists instead. Servants whispered in hallways that the mansion was cursed with silence and strategy. Word spread so far that when the CEO's assistant called nanny services, they pretended their lines were busy. By the time the next applicant arrived, the house wasn't just looking for a nanny, it was daring one to try. When she arrived at the mansion, no one believed she would last a day, much less make any difference. She wasn't what anyone expected for a job that dozens of professionals had run from in defeat. No expensive suit, no polished accent, no elite certifications. She walked in with calm confidence, carrying only a modest bag and a folder of basic documents. Her name was Elena Hart, a woman in her late 20s with a background that didn't impress the CEO's overworked assistant. She wasn't from a major agency. She hadn't handled billionaire families or attended elite institutions. In fact, she had once been a primary school teacher before leaving the profession due to budget cuts. After that, she worked at a community childcare center, tutoring emotionally struggling kids, nothing glamorous, nothing that screamed, fit for a millionaire's estate. When she entered the grand foyer, the staff shared knowing looks. They didn't bother hiding their skepticism. The butler whispered to the housekeeper, another one, as if counting down to failure. The chef, who'd seen nannies come and go like passing storms, muttered under his breath, "She won't last until dinner." Even the CEO, James Whitford, barely looked up when she was led into his office. Exhausted by the cycle of hiring and failure, he assumed she was just another hopeful who would resign by the end of the week. He glanced at her resume and asked one question without emotion. "Why this job?" Elena didn't give the standard answer about passion, professionalism, or ambition. She simply said, "Every difficult child is a child unheard." Her tone wasn't dramatic, it was steady, like someone stating a fact. The CEO paused for the first time in weeks, his pen still in his hand. He studied her face, almost waiting for her to break under his silence. She didn't. Against his own expectations, he hired her. Not because he believed in her, but because he had run out of options. He told her the rules, the schedule, the warnings. She listened without flinching, not once asking about salary, bonuses, or benefits. She just asked, "Where are the twins now?" The staff led her upstairs to the children's wing as though escorting someone to a battlefield. The hallway echoed with the memory of past failures. As she approached the twins' playroom, the air felt thick with anticipation and doubt. Everyone expected the same storyline: she walks in confident, walks out defeated. But Elena didn't hesitate at the door. She didn't ask for help, didn't request introductions, didn't brace herself. She simply knocked once, gently, and entered with the calm of someone who was not walking into a job, but into a calling. That was the moment everything quietly began to change. Elena didn't enter the twins' lives the way others had. She didn't start with rules, routines, or cheerful greetings. She simply stepped into their space and observed silently. Aiden was on the floor assembling a complicated model car without instructions. Aria sat by the window, reading a book upside down, not because she couldn't read it properly, but because she knew it unsettled adults. Most nannies would have rushed to correct, engage, or impress. Elena did none of that. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she set her bag down, pulled a chair from the corner, and sat, not facing them, but angled slightly away. She didn't claim authority or act overly friendly. Her silence intrigued them. They glanced, expecting her to introduce herself, hover, or ask annoying questions. She didn't. That alone disrupted their usual strategy. After 10 minutes of quiet, she took out a notebook, not to write rules or track behavior, but to sketch. No words. No instructions. Just shapes and lines. Aria, pretending not to care, watched through the reflection in the glass. Aiden pretended he wasn't curious, but his hands slowed. Finally, Aria broke the silence. "What are you doing?" Elena didn't look up. "Listening." "To what?" "To the room." Her tone didn't carry fake sweetness or forced enthusiasm. It was factual, calm, and oddly grounding. The twins exchanged a glance, their private signal that said, "This one is different. Maybe dangerous. Maybe interesting." Over the years, nannies had tried every trick: bribes, authority, educational games, threats, affection, silence, structure. But no one had ever treated the twins like equals with their own emotional landscape. Elena didn't try to win them. She didn't try to fix them. She simply made space for them. On the second day, she made no effort to force a schedule. Instead, she cooked breakfast herself, even though the mansion had chefs. She placed 3 plates on the table and sat without calling for them. No demands. No reminders. Just the faint smell of pancakes and cinnamon drifting through the hallway. They came, not because they were told, but because curiosity drew them in. While they ate, she didn't ask questions or correct their table manners. She only said one thing before taking a bite. "You two don't push people away because you're difficult. You do it because you're waiting for someone who won't run." Aiden froze with his fork in the air. Aria stared at her. Adults had labeled them problems, terrors, spoiled, unstable, but no one had named their loneliness. Elena didn't teach them obedience. She built trust through presence, not performance. Every word she spoke was deliberate. Every silence was intentional. She wasn't there to control them, she was there to understand them. And for the first time in years, the twins didn't feel studied, they felt seen. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened in a way no one saw coming. The staff, who were used to slammed doors, shouted refusals, and sudden resignations, began noticing small changes, quiet ones that felt almost unreal. On the 4th morning, instead of hiding behind locked doors when breakfast was served, the twins appeared on their own. They didn't greet anyone, but they sat at the table without protest. Aria placed her book beside her plate instead of bringing it into her lap. Aiden didn't try to sabotage anything or make sarcastic remarks. They weren't obedient, but they weren't battling, either. The chef and butler exchanged a stunned glance. Elena treated the twins like collaborators rather than children to be managed. She never raised her voice, but she also never backed down when something mattered. If they refused to do something, she didn't argue, she gave them a choice and accepted silence as an answer. When they tried to test her with emotional distance, she didn't chase them or try to earn approval. That alone disarmed their defenses. One afternoon, Aiden came downstairs with his tablet shattered. He tried to hide it, expecting anger or scolding. Elena only asked, "Did you break it because you were frustrated or because it was an accident?" No one had ever asked him why before. He didn't answer, but that night, for the first time in months, he slept without waking up crying. Aria had always pretended emotions were beneath her. She stayed composed, sharp, and dismissive. But one evening, Elena left a small unfinished sketch on the table, a sketch of the mansion's garden with 2 silhouettes standing beside an empty bench. No labels. No explanation. The next morning, Aria drew tiny birds in the sky above the figures. She didn't say a word, but the conversation had begun. James Whitford, the CEO, noticed the difference before he admitted it. The silence in his home no longer felt hostile, it felt calm. The twins stopped avoiding him and started eating dinner in the same room, even if they didn't speak. For a man used to controlling empires, he had never felt so helpless, and now, for the first time, he felt something close to hope. The day everything changed was subtle. Elena found the twins in the study room, arguing quietly over a puzzle. When she sat beside them, neither moved away. Aiden asked her opinion about a missing piece. Aria handed her a corner section without being asked. To anyone else, it would mean nothing, but to the mansion staff, it was a miracle. They didn't just accept her. They let her in, not because she demanded space in their lives, but because she proved she wouldn't abandon them like the others. And without realizing it, she didn't just become their nanny. She became the first person since their mother who made them feel safe enough to belong.